misinformation because they still have certain constructs in their mind. And these constructs are constructs of continents. So, universe and heavens that's going to call anybody to account and make sure justice is done. And that your mother and father is a monkey, an ape. And as this ape evolved and became Homo sapiens sapien someplace, he then went out of Africa, evolved into Homo sapiens sapien, and when he learned agriculture and animal husbandry, that's when civilization started, which all these people say is on the Tigris and Euphrates River. Not in Africa. My name is Baron Jamal Musa. I'd like to thank, first of all, having said, giving praise to the Creator, the One, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and mention peace and blessings on the Messenger Muhammad. I'd like to thank Brother Amir Muhammad here for agreeing to allow us to be here today, for having such a museum so people can be in touch with history that's not still in the mainstream truthfully. It's in the mainstream in the media, but it's not in the mainstream in terms of a standpoint of truth and exactness of what it is and how it manifested itself here in the Western Hemisphere. So, in brief, we are living in a country, a society, America, as a Western country, that many folks don't appreciate how Christianity became the unifying influence of Rome, and how Rome was able to unite East and West with Christian ideas. Many people in our communities think that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam were something that Europeans or Caucasians invented for their own selves. And this was done deliberately, so to make us think that particular way. People can't accept this information because they still have certain constructs in their mind. And these constructs are constructs of continents. So, European spatial appropriation and the myth of the continents. Here's from the U.S. Census Bureau. Categories of races. So this is straight from the government. This is how America recognizes races. So they recognize that the racial categories included in the census questionnaires generally reflect a social definition of race which is recognized in this country. But they admit it's not an attempt to define race biologically, anthropologically, or genetically. So races, in terms of the Census Bureau and the race categories, is based upon a social idea of basically what people want to be called and what they think they should be called. And here are racial categories. These are the official racial categories. You have white, black, or African American, American Indian or Alaska Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian, or other specific islander. Okay, now, if we looked at that and we studied that, we would notice something that's rather peculiar. And that is the first one in the order which appears on the Census website, white. And that's it, white. That says it all for people who currently have power in the earth. Their idea about themselves is not connected to geography. But everyone else, even though some of us identify as black, others as African American, and out of all of these other people who have some geography attached to their identity, this category here is the only category that has an identity that's based upon two different locations in the world. One across the Atlantic, and also identity on the other side, right, of the Atlantic. This category here, Asian, there's no American attached to Asian. Because socially, people who come here from Asia, they're not trying to be American. They're just trying to get the coin and send it back home. But people who are considered Asian, you'll never hear them call themselves Asian. Versus Chinese, Indian, Syrian, whatever the case may be. But our people are the only one that must have a map for our identity. And so this is the world how we generally see it. We have Europe, we have Asia, and here we have Africa, the land of sugar and spice. And everything was always nice in our idea until the invading European and Asiatics came in and messed everything up for us. This is our paradigm. In the book, there's an article written by St. Clair Drake, Africa Seen by American Negro Scholars. This is an old book that appeared in the 1940s, the early 50s. Vast, very complex, this is Africa viewed in any social dimension. At least 500 major ethnic groups, and twice that many minor ones. The basic psychological identification of the individual has for centuries been with those who spoke his own dialect, shared similar customs, and the basic solidarities have always been those of lineage and clan. So our people here in America, when we think of Africa, what particular ethnic group are we connecting to for our identity? We are not connected to a particular group, but we are connected to a concept, to a construct. Now, what if this was the only thing, people, we ever saw of the world as it exists, particularly what they call the old world, and we never had a boundary? Never had a label. We didn't know Europe, Asia, or Africa. Automatically, if this is all that we saw, we would come to know that our understanding of history and the world around us has to take a more complicated, more sophisticated, more of an analytical approach and view to our understanding. If we don't have information from our grandfather or our parents, then we would have to get from some trusted source about what really happened in this place that we call Africa. But for every other people, you don't see people from Europe or Asians walking around or selling merchandise with Europe on it or Asia on it saying, I'm an Asian, I'm a European. Right? We're the only people who have merchandise with this particular shape forms our identity. Now, this is all we ever saw. Why would we cut around and leave this portion right here out? There's nothing in this spatial presentation that makes us think, no, this is separate from this here. But there's another process in place that's making us think that, and it's deliberate. What if we saw a map that looks like this? And these are my own geographic boundaries that I put on this map. Europe, Africa, and Asia. Now, because of the map of Africa that's already been impressed upon our minds, this map wouldn't change your identity of yourself, or for most people. But it could change their perspectives and identity of myself. They might say, is this fool crazy? I know he's not calling us here to hear Europe is a part of Africa. That can't be the case. Why is that? Back to those census definitions. White is defined as, even though they don't use the term, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa. This is the official understanding of the United States Census, Department of Commerce. Many of us can't understand that. But you look at it on the flip side, notice white, again, when they have power and prestige, their idea of themselves doesn't have to be attached to a continental background. They can see themselves as being universal. We're Europe, we're Middle East, and we're North Africa. They don't have a problem with it. But for some of us, if you say, hey, you're universal, you're not stuck or confined within the continent, you might have a fight. Because we want to keep ourselves confined to one particular space, and we don't even know it. Now, if we had a map that looked like this for some folks would be worse. If this part of the world was Asia, someone looked at that map and said, oh no, this guy's crazy. You're not saying Kemet, our beautiful, beloved Kemet, the beginning and end of everything in civilization, belongs to the Asiatic? They would say, this people in here have lost their mind. This Arab, Hebrew, Christianity type thing. Some people will see in their mind. They can't take it. They're taking the Nile Valley and giving it to the Asians. But do we question the maps that we generally trust? We don't know who the map makers are. Now, what about this? And this is the type of map. Oh, this Jamal Musa guy is all right. Africa now belongs to Europe and also parts of Asia on this map. And we are Africans, and they are us, and we are them. We could never imagine ourselves as being invaders, could we? We would never harm anyone. Our idea is that the whole world was a blank template until we built up civilization in Kemet, and then we built up civilization in Kemet, and then we built up civilization in Kemet. And then we said, hey, let's go out and explore and take this civilization everywhere else. Or if we even have a notion that there could have been some other people living in these places, our idea of it is that they said, oh, here comes the African, please come and civilize us. Build us for us this wonderful civilization, we'll make you the leaders. See, this is the out of Africa theory. And our people are so starved to be recognized within European paradigms, we don't even understand truthfully what the out of Africa theory really is. The out of Africa theory is not to say the black man and woman, the African is the mother and father of civilization. The out of Africa theory is designed to say there is no creator of the universe and heavens that's going to call anybody to account and make sure justice is done. And that your mother and father is a monkey, an ape. And as this ape evolved and became Homo sapiens sapien someplace, he then went out of Africa, evolved into Homo sapiens sapien, and when he learned agriculture and animal husbandry, that's when civilization started, which all these people say is on the Tigris and Euphrates River, not in Africa. So the out of Africa theory, folks, is not a concession based upon the European scholars and paleoanthropologists that the Africans are the mother and fathers of civilization. It's a reverse construct. But if this is all we ever saw, then again, our world has to, our approach to the world has to be more sophisticated and more complex. Now, there's a book by Lewis and Wieg, The Myth of the Continents, and they explain in detail how continents are designed to make individuals really miss true interactions between human beings. And they say, perhaps because continents are such obvious visual units, their utility is seldom questioned. Equally in the realms of natural history and human geography, the important distributional pattern and structuring process are not based on continental divisions. This is a hard thing for us who are stuck on maps for our identity to understand. And they go on to say most of what is unique about Africa begins south of the Sahara Desert, not south of the Mediterranean Sea. Dana has an article, The Myth of the Mediterranean Race, and I was talking to her about that. Many people, our people don't understand that Africa is part of the Mediterranean above the Sahara. Africa above the Sahara has a lot in common with Spain, with Italy, with the islands, with what's known as Europe. But really, it's all land, it's all space. The continents, again, they're not scientific. And it says, and the division between Europe and Asia is entirely arbitrary. There's nothing in the geology that makes these two places separate continents. They say in practice the continental system continues to be applied in such a way as to suggest that the continents are at once physically and culturally constituted, and that natural and human features somehow are supposed to correspond in space. So, as an example, here's a borderline. We think because the continents, and we try to put everything into a continental framework, that from here, people don't change, and all this distance. But that everyone in here has the same culture, has the same religion, has the same outlook on life. But just beyond there, and just beyond there, we imagine people to be radically different. This slippage of categories, meaning slipping from natural features and human features and getting it confused, suggests that the continent itself, through some unspecified process, imparts an essence to its human inhabitants. The result is that the actual cultural connections and distinctions across the complexly variegated human landscape are made to seem pale before these arbitrary divisions of continents, which means, what essence do the continents impart that accounts for different phenotypes, culture, and religions? So the question is, that the geographer says that you have this map, you have this space, and somehow people think there's something in the water, something in the air, something in the sunshine that uniquely makes people African or Asian or European. And subconsciously in our mind, for black people, people in America, we generally stay within this confine here. Anything outside of it, so we think we automatically conceded to the world of Europeans. They have put us in a box, in a frame, and we only can think within this continental framework. But what's in the water, what's in the land, what's in the sand? What is it that makes us think, oh, everybody within this large area is the same? So in the myth of the continents, they observe the fauna of northern Africa is more closely allied to that of northern Eurasia than it is to the quote-unquote Ethiopian fauna of sub-Saharan Africa and southern Arabia. North Africa, above the Sahara, has more in common in terms of the fauna, the plant life, with Eurasia, but below the Sahara, Ethiopia and southern Arabia have the same fauna. Madagascar, on the other hand, while conventionally classified as merely a large African island, unambiguously forms its own faunal realm. So, what they observe here is that Madagascar, way out here in the water, we see this as Africa. We see this as foreign, Asiatic to Africa. We even see this as foreign. But guess what? This is further away than this and this. And the people in Madagascar are not quote-unquote Africans. These people are Malaysians. And the majority of people speak a Mali language. But we think of these people as Africans and these people are foreign. But it could be in the reverse. We can't trust the maps to tell us what the real situation is. That's why we need to have some history behind it. Aramco in his world. These are the people who are over there in Saudi Arabia digging the oil out of the ground. They know about geology more than any people. And they wrote a book for their people who lived there in Arabia. And they said in their book about Arabia. Arabia belongs to and is part of a huge and relatively uniform geographical unit stretching from the west coast of Africa across 6,000 miles to the Indus Valley. They recognize the geology, the climate. It's the same from the west of Africa through Arabia all the way to the Indus Valley. So why do certain people have an imagination of themselves that's short of this distance here? All right, so it has to be something about the north-south spatial location, right? Because when we look at a map, we do have some general notion that the further north you go, people are white. The further down we go, people are brown, they're black, they're dark-skinned. And so is that really what makes a difference? So let's take a look at these things here. So, put up some data from the NASA website. Here we have Gibraltar. That's in Spain, just over across from quote-unquote Africa. Land of the Europeans, land of the white, so we think. Is at 36.14 degrees latitude. Tangier, which is in Morocco, as Africa, land of the blacks, is at 35.75 degrees latitude. So, Tangier is 39 degrees south of Gibraltar. What this means is that if we take this as the gospel, 35.75 degrees latitude would make people dark because that's where Tangier is. So if we're at this latitude, we assume that the people are going to be black. Okay, let's do another comparison. Tangier, 36.14, Gibraltar, 36.14, Tangier, 35.75, and we'll compare this to Mecca, the city of, the holy city of the Muslims, where we know that the Nabi, the Prophet Muhammad, did what it was that took place. Mecca is located at 21.38 degrees latitude. That means Mecca is 14.7 degrees south of Gibraltar. It makes it 14.35 degrees further south of Gibraltar than what Tangier is at 35.75 degrees. So if 35.75 degrees makes people black, how can the people living at 21.38 degrees be imagined by us as white? So if you looked at this map, most people in their mind would just think that, people are here are dark, people are here are dark. But when it comes to the Arabian Peninsula, people just transform their minds and we thinking these people as white. And of those people who think that the original people here might have been of darker hue, of more melanin, for some reason when it comes to Arabia, they think those people totally disappeared. But when they see similar people in Egypt, they automatically say, no, no, no. They're foreigners, they're invaders, they're not the original. And they imagine in their minds that the original blacks are just in there being discriminated against, being held down. But in Arabia, they don't think that. Even they concede that the original people were black, where did they go? Where did they go? Just because of that geographical boundary, anything inside of Africa, we think the original black people are still around. But outside of that, we think something different. Okay, now let's look at it from another standpoint. Driving distance. So maybe proximity to people will shape cultures. Right? We look at Giza. This is the holy city of Kemet where the pharaohs are buried. From Mecca, holy city of Islam. From Giza to Mecca is a distance of 1,057.92 miles. From Giza to Ife, the home of the Yoruba. From Giza to Ife is 4,304.46 miles. Giza is 3,246 miles closer to Mecca than Ife. So how do we imagine that Ife, the Yoruba people, are more close as Africans to the people of Egypt when they're at a distance of 3,246 miles further away than the quote-unquote Arabs of Mecca? What sense does it make? When you think about it mathematically, and you process things analytically, you see that the maps mislead. Giza to Jerusalem was now thought to be the holy city of the Jews, which is, but it's thought to be for some people always the case. But that probably was not always the case. From Giza to Jerusalem is 471 miles. From Giza to Accra, home of the Asante, the mighty Asante warriors, the Asante stool that came down from heaven. From Giza to Accra is 4,529 miles. So that means that Giza is 4,000 miles closer to Jerusalem than what it is to the home of the Asante. So how can the people 4,000 miles away be more connected to a people than the people that's only 471 miles from them? Do this last one here. Giza to Rome, that's clearly in the white man's world, isn't it? Rome, Italy, the home of Christianity. From Giza to Rome is 2,540 miles. That's a long way away, isn't it? We know those people have to be different then. From Giza to Alundi, the home of Shaka Zulu and the mighty Zulu people. The distance from Giza to Alundi is 5,728 miles. The people of Shaka Zulu live 3,187 miles further away from ancient Kemet than the white Europeans in Rome did. So what constitutes real differences in humanity? Pigeonholing historical and cultural data into a continental framework fundamentally distorts basic spatial patterns, which will lead to misapprehensions of cultural and social differentiation. And this is what this means. When you pigeonhole things into a continental framework, it'll make you think that you can't see that people within this, people within here, could be different. Because you're trying to think that everything must match like a puzzle. You're like a kid with a crayon trying to color and not go outside the lines. They noticed that from the students that they had, this is Lewis and Wiegand, having been taught that continents are the basic building blocks of global geography, our students slide easily into assuming that the configuration of land masses must correspond to the distribution of cultural traits and social forms. So what we're saying here is that when you pigeonhole things in the continent and you think that the land masses somehow are the same as social interactions, you fail to realize, even contemplate, that the people here and here on both sides of this division could be the same. Likewise, it's possible that people here and here could be the same. Or people here and here could be the same. At least some of them. It's a possibility, but when we look at the continents and use that for our perception of reality, we don't think about those possibilities. We automatically think the Africans are only here, these people are here, and these people are all different people. And we never think they had any interaction, any movement with each other. Now, I already gave it away in the slide. My slide is not building, it's better, it's faster that way anyway. One of the best ways people can determine cultural interaction, folks, other than DNA, which you really can't trust all the time, because you have to take DNA of the people. You only can take DNA most often of the people that are there in the place now. You can't take DNA of the people who might have occupied it hundreds of years ago. So if anybody wanted to know about the indigenous people here 400 years ago, 500, 600 years ago, they couldn't go to Georgetown and take a sample of somebody running around in college, Georgetown College, and think, oh, these are the same people that were here a long time ago. It wouldn't work. But language is how we know that we have cultural interaction. Ms. Perelsveg wrote a book, Languages of the World, and she says, as with human biological families, a language family is a phylogenetic unit. A classification of languages into a language family implies that they descend from a common parent language, which is known as a proto-language. And just as members of human biological families typically share observable characteristics, such as facial features, skin color, predisposition to certain medical conditions, and so on, so language in a given family shares certain observable linguistic characteristics, such as words, sounds, and grammatical patterns. So this is one of the ways you can tell there's cultural interaction amongst people. Science of etymology, they put things into a language family. Philologists. All right, so Ethnologue is an organization that is the world-leading organization in classifying all the language families of the world. And they categorize Naga Congo is the largest language family in the world. It has 1,539 languages just in the Niger Congo language family, which they understand that this came from one proto-language, means these people sometime in the way far past were the same people. Nilo-Saharan, they're within the construct of Africa, 207 languages. Khoisan in South Africa, they call these click languages. There's 14 known languages. And then we have Afro-Asiatic with 376 languages. But Houston, we have a problem here. What is meant by Afro-Asiatic? That does not fit our continental construct. It cannot be that at some point in time, the Africans and the Asiatic were the same people. For some of us, our whole paradigms and constructs are based on the opposite of that. In the Afro-Asiatic language family, you have Egyptian/Coptic. Uh-oh. Now we have Semitic in that same language family. How do we have the Jews and the Arabs in there with ancient Egypt? That does not seem right, does it? As a part of the Semitic language in the same language family is the Aramaic language. Canaanite. That's getting too close to the Bible. Hebrew is a dialect of the Canaanite language. And last but not least, these scientists who group languages together put Arabic in the Semitic language family, all a part of the Afro-Asiatic language family, which includes Egyptian. So, Lucy, you got some explaining to do. Most people are not going to be able to get that pigeonhole information. Now, his particular book, and I've spoken to this young man on Facebook. He's a very personable young fellow, Wajumin Mayat. He wrote a book called The Census Meta-Necha, Inscription of Divine Words. And this is what he observed. The African School of Egyptology and Linguistics offers a more rigorous scientific method of investigating the affinities of the language than methods used by scholars previously mentioned. He says, Dr. Theophile Obenga and Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, we call him, but the French say, brothers from synagogue school, me on this, is Sheikh Anta Diop. Sheikh Anta Diop, among other things, have turned Greenberg's language classification for the Middle East upside down. The great construction of the Afro-Asiatic language family disappeared under the relentless scholarship of Obenga and Diop and continues to be debunked. Therefore, we adopt the language classification of Negro-Egyptian in general and post-classical Negro-Egyptian specifically. Out of all the things that the ancient people of Kemet probably called themselves, I think the last one would be Negro. But for some of us, it's better to make the ancient Kemetic people unique Negroes, because we have to rescue them out of this Asiatic language family. Because the Asiatics, to some, are foreign to us. Because we know Judaism, Islam, and even Christianity is associated with it. And we see that as a paradigm that's not a paradigm that our people can benefit from. And that's what it's really all about. It's not about who the ancient Kemetic people really were. Because we could have probably used a language that was more beneficial to the language. Classify the people how they classify themselves. But that's not really what some of us are after. We want to make the people us. We need that connection. So if we call them outside their name and make the name that we're familiar with, that's what our goal is. Shake at the yoke. One of the same individuals that the brother said, turn this thing upside down. This is what he wrote in his book, Joke, Black Africa, Economic and Cultural Basis for a Federated State. When you're a scholar, you can't just read one thing somebody writes. I bet you if Dana did something 30 years ago, she might come up with some new information and might have a revision to what she wrote 30 years ago. I mean, who knows it's possible? Because as more information comes to us, we learn more, we explore, and new information comes. So you got to explore everything. You just can't take one thing and run with it. And this is what Shake at the Joke wrote in one of his works. I have demonstrated in my earlier books all the biological and cultural kinships between Arabs and black Africans. A kinship so old that it goes back to the 5th millennium BC and the beginning of the 4th with the birth of the Semitic world. This kinship greatly antedates Islam, but all the prejudice inherited during the history of the intervening centuries have obscured it. One day it will come to the fore once again, and it is a factor not to be overlooked in the unifying dynamic of the continent. This is what the man wrote, that these people said was debunking the notion of Afro-Asiatic, as if his whole life was to make these people separate and distinct. That's not what his life was dedicated to. He says here, he's demonstrated in all his books, the biological and cultural kinships. But Afro-Asiatic makes us not able to see that, because we have the Red Sea and the Isthmus of Suez as a dividing line. Now, not only that, here's a book, McDermott, Decoding Egyptian Hieroglyphics. Asiatics were generally reviled by the Egyptian population, often dismissed as vile or wretched. Despite this popular antipathy, however, Egypt established various commercial ventures with Asiatics, some of whom migrated into Egypt. By the New Kingdom period, the hieroglyphic language was littered with West Semitic aspects and infused with Asiatic expressions related to trade and religion. Well, how else these language families being debunked when you get into a period of the Ses Metanetta and the scholars say it's infused with West Semitic concepts? And they don't say that they had to develop any new characters to express these West Semitic concepts. Asiatic gods such as the storm god Baal and the war deities Anath and Resheph were adopted into the Egyptian pantheon. It was not unusual for an Asiatic to work and own property in Egypt. Some Asiatics even married Egyptians and overcame prejudice to rise to eminent positions in Egyptian society. Now, maps don't allow that, because maps don't tell you history and interaction and back and forth between people. So how could the people have their gods in another people's language, but the language be totally separate from those people? It's not what the history says, it's what we want to believe based upon our ignorance of what actually took place. She further said in this book, the Egyptians are known to have traded with the Puntites from the Old Kingdom onward, and seem to have navigated the route to Punt by boat along the Red Sea coast. Punt supplied Egypt with a range of exotic goods, including incense, ivory, ebony, gold, and animal skins. Because it also produced luxury goods used by the clergy, Punt was often described as God's land in the Medu Neter. The people of ancient Kemet did not say Kemet itself was Tar Neter. They said a place to the south of them that they traveled to the Red Sea was God's land. Now, if we're not afraid of what our studies would show, and we don't pigeonhole, we'd have to ask ourselves the question, how could something be so important to a people's spiritual practices if those spiritual practices began without those things? Why would they arbitrarily call a place Ta-Netta, God's land, if they had something they could do without? John Jackson, Introduction to African Civilizations. He has a clue, perhaps. The Edgewood text is an important source document on the early history of the Nile Valley. This famous inscription found in the Temple of Horus gives an account of the origin of Egyptian civilization. Well, look at there. There's a document that gives us an account of the origin of Egyptian civilization. According to this record, civilization was brought from the south by a band of invaders. The author's words, not mine. Under the leadership of King Horus. This ruler Horus was later deified and became ultimately the Egyptian Christ. Wow. Invaders from the south. I guess there were people in the Nile Valley. This early culture has been traced back to Somaliland. There are ruins of buildings constructed with dressed stone showing close resemblance to the architecture of early Egypt. Documented in their temples that the people in their own recollection of their history, they came from the south. And then the archaeologists found in Somaliland structures, architecture that was similar to that of the Nile Valley. Basil Davidson wrote a book, The Lost Cities of Africa. And in this book, he talks about a document called The Purpose of the Erythraean Sea, which is written by a Greek sailor in 1 AD. And it was an account of this Greek sailor going down the Red Sea. And this is what Mr. Davidson records of that. The people of the ports of the continent of Azania is what they call it, another name in this particular point near 1 AD, of Kenya and Tanganyika were men of piratical habits, very great in stature and under separate chiefs for each place. But the coast itself was claimed by a southern Arabian potentate under some ancient right which subjects it to the dominant state in Arabia, successively, as we have seen, to the princes of Asan, Kadaban, Sabia, and Himyar. In 1 AD, the Greek sailor said it already was an ancient right that on the east coast of the Red Sea, or the quote-unquote African coast, it was dominated. It was part of the kinship of these dynasties here. Thousands, hundreds of years before even the Asiatic invaders as Arab Muslims coming into Egypt tear up things. There's another book, the Mammoth Book of Eyewitnesses in Ancient Egypt. Everything in this book comes from the Metanetta or Papyrus, and it's translated. And they document a trip to Punt by Henu, the steward of Mentuhotep, circa 2000 BC. He says, "My Lord, life, prosperity, health, sent me to dispatch a ship to Punt to bring for him fresh myrrh from the sheikhs over the Red Land by reason of the fear of him in the highlands." I'm trying to track down this source which is translated, but I know this word sheikhs. I know where that word comes from. And I know a normal European in their own mind wouldn't just see a word and translate it as sheikhs to make themselves feel good. And then he continues in this document, "Then I reached the Red Sea. Then I made this ship and I dispatched with it everything. When I had made for it a great oblation of cattle, bulls, and ibex." Then he christened the ship and it sailed down the Red Sea to go to Punt. So if this holy land, Ta-Netta, was in the Nile Valley, why couldn't they just take a ship down the Nile or flow up the Nile, how the currents go? No, they had to get to the Red Sea. So where were they going? Outside of that continental boundary of Africa, I bet. Manly P. Hall, The Secret Teacher of All Ages. Fully called Encyclopedic Outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian Symbolism. Symbolic Philosophy, which is originally published in 1929. He talks about the Ante-Nicene Fathers, before the Nicene Council. Clement of the Ante-Nicene Fathers describes in the 1st century after Christ the peculiar nature and habits of the phoenix in this way. There's a certain bird which is called a phoenix. This is the only kind that lives for 500 years. It takes up that nest in which are the bones of its parents. And bearing these, it passes from the land of Arabia into Egypt to the city called Heliopolis. and in open day, flying in the sight of all men, it places him on the altar of the sun. And having done this, it hastens back to its former abode. So the Egyptian prince, the Kemetic princes that were there, the retinue, they told the people, the Europeans that were there, and here in Heliopolis, the holy city of On, this Banu bird, it doesn't come from the Nile Valley. The home of this bird is in the land of Arabia, is where it comes from. Why would these people say these things if everything was bounded up into the continental construct of Africa?
Can you go back to the name of that book, the last book you referenced?
Not this one.
The one right before that, please.
Yes, ma'am. The Mammoth Book of Eyewitness Ancient Egypt. So everything in that book is a source document, and it's just straight translations.
What's the Lewis first name?
I don't know what Lewis' first name is. I didn't bring that book out, but I'll send it to you. All right, I'm going to come to a conclusion. You see this picture here? See these people at the top? You see those people at the bottom? People at the top represent the rulers of Kemet. And these people at the bottom, I'm not exactly for sure who they represent, either Nubia or Kush, or whatever they call it, trying to cipher. But these people wanted everybody to know, and for a long period of time, that we are different than these people on the bottom. And I had a conversation with somebody about this picture. Somebody who said there used to be any man. I said, do you see here different phenotypes? The brother said, that is not different phenotypes. Yeah, that's different complexions. I said, that's all you see in this picture here, which was etched in stone to be remembered forever, is different complexions? He came back, yes, different complexions. And then he added in there, we know that the Arabs are over there lightening up the pictures. And this is still going on. So out of 1,000 years, the Arab people haven't been able to destroy Kemet yet. Clearly, the people at the bottom are different phenotypes. We would consider them all black, perhaps today, in our understanding. But one of these people might not belong to the Nile Valley. One of these people, we might have to believe what their sources say, that we came from the south, from an area along the Red Sea. And that's why we had to go to the Red Sea to get our frankincense and myrrh, because that's our original homeland. So when you pigeonhole things into a continental framework, these things cannot be seen. All right, so in closing, before we bring Dana up, I'm going to skip. Well, I'll go back to this one real quick. Country Studies Area Handbook Series. The Federal Research Division of the Library of Congress published these country study area handbooks. And the U.S. Department of the Army financed this project, and I came across it. And we have adults here, so I don't need to say, I hope, anything else further about this source. It's financed by the Department of the Army, about countries. And they have a country study about Sudan that came out in 1991. And they admit in it, contests between Nubians and Arabs long predated the coming of Islam. The two most important Arabic-speaking groups to emerge in Nubia were the Jali and the Juhayna. And then they say both showed physical continuity with the indigenous pre-Islamic population. What are they saying there without saying it? They saying that we know what you don't know. And it's important that our boys and girls that we send over there know not what we tell everyone here, not what we show you on TV, but you need to know the truth of the matter so you can do a yeoman's job for us over there. So the world, when we look at maps, people, is not how it seems to be. To understand history correctly and to understand interactions between persons It requires a more sophisticated analysis. It requires research. Looking at a map and flipping pages is not research. And worse, we have many people today who think research is getting up in the morning and clicking on a website on the internet. I've seen some of these guys in debates and they're right there on the debate. Wait a minute, let me bring up my source. On the internet. They think that's scholarship and they call themselves, imagine themselves to be scholars. But what I try to get them to understand is listen, all of our people, whatever we believe in, whatever we understand to be the truth, is a discussion that needs to be had. But it's not a discussion that needs to be had in ignorance. If you think the original Hebrew people, the original Arabs, are white Asiatics, if you can't tell by that map that these people share the same cultural region of the world, I really can't have a debate, an intelligent discussion with you. But don't say I follow a European idea of a thing when your total identity as who you are is not based in geological or geographic reality, but is based upon the European constructs of continents. And you lash out against your brother and sister in ignorance, thinking they're following a white paradigm, when your whole identity is based on a European paradigm. Because continents were created and invented, the concept, by the Greeks. Not by the people whom they define. And in the book, Myth of Continents, they admit that. Last slide. Yes. The foundational ideas of world geography are rooted in the debates of the ancient Greeks. This is not merely true, it is essential to note for the contemporary European American societies. Greek geography has been to a certain extent globalized in what were originally Western categories. Such notions as Europe, Asia, and Africa are now employed throughout the world. But to transcend Eurocentrism initially requires very close engagement with the history of European thought. And I can't get into that now, but I have a whole construct of maps and to show people how this whole thing was created. And basically, in a nutshell, when the Europeans came over to Judea, they gave up, after years, everything that they believed, Zeus, Logos, and all these types of things, and they adopted the religion of a people who called the Creator El, or Allah. And in order for them to successfully do that, they had to reappropriate the world and its space under the notion of Noah and his 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And to Ham was designated Africa, the blacks, to remove black people, the Ethiopians, who they knew was on both sides of the Red Sea. When they wanted to appropriate this story, they had to remove black people out of it. Create a neutral world, a white world, and the black world. And then they could imagine themselves as the children of God themselves. And unfortunately, many of our people have fell for this hook, line, and sinker. The contrary to popular belief, these people, these actual descendants, are still there.